So judicial reform has actually been one of the cornerstones issues in the last election that many of the politicians were actually promising to change. And this is something that has been happening for over a decade. Ayelet Shaked tried to push judicial reform. There's about 65% of the population in Israel actually supports judicial reform. The issue with the current system is that the judges can rule on any law that they don't agree with and just take it down and just say that it's unconstitutional. So basically, the Supreme Court right now can overturn any law that they want, and they can also overturn any kind of basic law that's introduced into the country. It's pretty much saying that any Supreme Court could overrule a constitutional amendment. Also, what they've done is they've given the Attorney General more power than the elected official of the Prime Minister. Again, the Attorney General is not elected by the people, but the Attorney General can override anything the Prime Minister says, and instead of being an advisory role. I don't know if you guys can imagine this happening in any other country in the world. Again, many of the Israeli former judges like Menachem Alon, Moshe Landi, Tzvi Tal have said that the Supreme Court has gone way too far in its power. And also Richard Posner from the United States, which is also a legal expert, has also said that the Supreme Court acts like pirates.
In the case of Netanyahu, he was under a series of corruption investigations. You can say that they were politically charged. You can say that they were real. Doesn't really matter. With the judiciary intact, those investigations will ultimately go forward, and the only way he can retain immunity is to continue as being prime minister. But as you might have noticed, Israel is a bit of a national security state.
So Peter Zeihan has said that Netanyahu is trying to push his judicial reform because he wants to maintain and become the leader of Israel forever. And the fact is, this is anything further from the case. Netanyahu did not make this legislation. This legislation was brought in by Member of Parliament Yariv Levin. And this was actually agreed upon for many years, that many of the right-wing parties have been pushing for a judicial reform because they don't want the Supreme Court to be able to overturn any of the basic laws. Now, people that don't know, the basic laws of Israel are pretty much the Constitution of Israel, and I don't know of any other Supreme Court in the world that can overturn an amendment in the Constitution because they don't agree with it.
And the judicial reforms that Netanyahu was trying to do were so damaging to the fabric of the political system that his own defense minister, defense in Israel is a big thing, stood up and said that this has to stop. Netanyahu fired the dude earlier this week, which meant that the coalition that allows Netanyahu to even be prime minister in the first place was suddenly in danger, and so he's had to back down, at least for now.
Again, Peter Zeihan says that Yoav Gallant was fired from his position as the security minister. That did not happen. Netanyahu decided at the end not to fire him, because doing so at the time before the start of the recent flare-ups in Gaza was seen as not a very smart idea to fire the defense minister. Also, Yoav Gallant is in favor of the judicial reform, but he's also in favor of negotiating with the opposition so that the protesters and people can agree on legislation that both sides will pass. So normally I like Peter Zeihan, I like his political commentaries. I think he's got good information, he does great analysis, but when it comes to the judicial reform, I think he's either because he barely talked too much about it. He tried to bring up other examples from other countries, but he really hasn't gone in depth in the video about what's really happening in Israel and what the judicial reforms actually entail and who actually made the judicial reform, which is Yariv Levin, not Benjamin Netanyahu. And on top of that, when it comes to the thing the judicial reform may have some criticism to put in, is the fact that the current way to override a Supreme Court decision is a vote of 61 over 120 members of Parliament, which definitely has its own criticism, which I can accept. But other than that, I believe most, if not all, of the judicial reform I actually agree with, and so do most Israelis. Hey guys, I hope you liked the video. If you like more, please comment, like, and subscribe.